รัสเซลส์เมืองหลวงของประเทศเบลเยียมเป็นเมืองที่มีความสำคัญมากอีกแห่งหนึ่งของโลกค่ะทั้งทางด้านเศรษฐกิจการเมืองการปกครองและเป็นศูนย์กลางความร่วมมือของประเทศในกลุ่มยุโรปค่ะเมืองนี้ได้รับการขนานนามว่าเป็นเมืองหลวงของสหภาพยุโรปเพราะเป็นที่ตั้งสำนักงานใหญ่ของสหภาพยุโรปดังนั้นนโยบายหลักๆก็จะมีการประชุมและตัดสินใจร่วมกันที่นี่ค่ะหน่วยงานของชาติอื่นๆในกรุงบรัสเซลส์อาจจะมีความสัมพันธ์ระดับทวิภาคีและความสัมพันธ์กับสหภาพยุโรปควบคู่กันไปอย่างเช่นสถานเอกอัครราชทูตไทยณกรุงบรัสเซลส์นั้นก็จะทำหน้าที่ดูแลความสัมพันธ์ทางด้านทวิภาคีกับประเทศเบลเยียมและลักเซมเบิร์กค่ะและในเวลาเดียวกันก็ต้องรับผิดชอบดูแลความสัมพันธ์กับสหภาพยุโรปควบคู่กันไปด้วยค่ะในด้านความสัมพันธ์ระดับทวิภาคีนั้นสถานเอกอัครราชทูตไทยก็จะดูแลความสัมพันธ์ระหว่างประเทศไทยกับประเทศเบลเยียมและประเทศลักเซมเบิร์กควบคู่กันไปซึ่งจะคอยเสริมสร้างความร่วมมือให้เกิดขึ้นในทุกมิติทั้งทางด้านการเมืองเศรษฐกิจการค้าการลงทุนด้านสังคมและวัฒนธรรม
Director General for Health and Consumers on the topic of EU regulations on food additives, and the second one is Dr. Claudia Loncancio-Benier on the topic of risk assessment on food additives.
ค่ะขอต้อนรับทุกท่านนะคะกลับเข้าสู่การสัมมนาในช่วงบ่ายค่ะสำหรับในช่วงแรกนะคะจะเป็นการบรรยายเรื่อง EU regulations on food additives โดยดร. กัตรัน เกาฮอฟผู้เชี่ยวชาญจากคณะกรรมาธิการยุโรปด้านสุขภาพและผู้บริโภคหรือ DG Sanko นะคะท่านได้เดินทางมาจากกรุงบรัสเซลส์ประเทศเบลเยียมค่ะและการบรรยายเรื่อง risk assessment on food additivesโดยดร. คลาวเดีย ลองคานซิโอ เบนเนียในโอกาสนี้ดิฉันขอมอบเวทีให้แก่ท่านผู้ดำเนินรายการค่ะขอบคุณค่ะ
ขอบคุณครับ Good morning sorry good afternoon oh okay so welcome back to the session in the afternoon as I see in the room, I can estimate that about 95% of the participants still here, just only 5% left. So, very good. So, in the afternoon, we have mainly two main sessions. One session will be on food additives. The next one will be on food contaminants. So, both of them are very interesting. So we start with the one on food additives, and there will be two presentations on this one. One will be on the regulation on food additives, another one on the risk assessment of the food additives. So the new speaker in the afternoon, Dr. Gudrun Gauhoff. So may I call you Dr. Gudrun? Dr. Gudrun is currently working in the Legal Affairs Unit of DG Sanko of the European Commission and has been with the European Commission for 17 years. Before working with the European Commission, she was working with the German State Laboratory and also the Federal Ministry of Health of Germany. Dr. Gudrun got her PhD from the Hanover Veterinary College in Germany and also obtained degrees of laws via distance learning from British University. So she can make the combination of the scientific and laws in her presentation. So let's welcome Dr. Gudrun Gauhoff, please.
Good afternoon for this session after the... Closer? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Can you hear me now? It's better? Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon for this session after the lunch break, which is very appropriately on food additives. Some of them you probably have also noticed in the food, but we saw some very bright cakes, so they normally cannot be produced without some additives at least. We will have a look, I will have a look here in my presentation on the regulations on food additives, while Claudia will talk more about the evaluation of the additives afterwards. So what are the food additive, what is the regulatory framework? We have a regulation on food additives, which as you can see is the oldest one in this list. As Patrick has already said this morning, we worked in the EU on food additives for a long time, because these food additives are one of the areas where also the member states have in the past differed in applying them. We had the discussions were triggered by the free movement of goods between the member states, and as member states have different kind of specific foods, which are often also produced with additives, that very early on created a barrier to trade within the member states, and therefore was always an issue which had to be regulated and create a lot of controversies. Those people, for instance, who have been to the United Kingdom, to London or some other city, have maybe seen in the hotel in the morning this kind of fish which is very yellow. This kind of fish nobody else in the Union is fond of or is caring for. Everybody else eats the fish just white, as you know, as you do it here. But for some reason in the UK it was a cultural heritage to eat the fish brightly yellow colored, and that was, for instance, one of the controversies. Also, the issue with the nitrogens in ham that Patrick mentioned earlier is one thing that is related to this root problem, I would say, in the Union. Because in Denmark, people don't expect ham or salami or these kind of things to be so brightly red colored as you can produce them if you use nitrates. That triggered a discussion between several member states on how much nitrate do you need as a preservative, and how much do you need because it's keeping the color different or brighter red than it would be if you weren't using it. So that's why we have already very early on regulated on additives, and saw a need on doing this. You have, maybe to understand this development also, it's necessary to know that we have general paragraphs in our treaties always said that goods should move freely between the member states. But this general paragraph, obviously you can say something very general, and then you find out case by case that it's not so easy as it appears to be. So you have then to tackle case by case the issue, and the rules in the EU are that these general principles on free movement of goods, including food, would always be applicable as long as there is no more specific directive or regulation as it be. So no more specific secondary rules. So if you get then into dispute between Denmark and Italy about how much nitrate you use in salami, that triggers a dispute between the member states, maybe also between several, or between the United Kingdom and Greece about the coloring of fish, then this would rise to the EU level, and we would have then an obligation or a political call in the Union with the institutions to see that these rules are then what we call harmonized. And this is the background between for the additives. We have also a second regulation laying down specifications on food additives. So this is more about what the detail of what has to be in an additive, and we have also now applicable a regulation on setting up a program on the re-evaluation of approved additives. So all of the rules that we have now are regulations. And as Patrick explained before, in the beginning we had directives. And directives are normally taken into the national legislation, which means that, for instance, if you would do this, you would have already, as somebody told me, you're aiming at something Asian, where you would like to harmonize the Asian rules on additives. You would then have a Thai rule on additive, and an Asian legislation would come in as a directive. You would then take the existing Thai law and change it accordingly, according to that directive. So that's what we did in the beginning in the EU as well. And that's how you have to understand why we have directives and regulations. So directives allow a little bit more tolerance between the different rules. They also allow member states that have already an existing body of law that everybody is aware of to continue to have it and to continue to use that body of law. So if you imagine Thailand again in the Asian countries, you would now start harmonized rules for additives in Asia. It would mean that Thailand probably would want to use rather the directive form because you have already a lot of legislation. And a country like Myanmar, which maybe doesn't have anything, they do what some of our member states did in the beginning. They just printed a cover note and put the directive in the original form behind it. So that allowed a lot of flexibility and easiness of application in the beginning. On additives, we have gone through several reforms now, so that we have quite a lot of additives harmonized. You would say in Eurospeak, the rules on additives are completely harmonized. We come back to that issue later on when I talk about contaminants, where the situation is a bit different. So, the regulation on which is now called 1333 or 1333 of 2008 on feed additives provides for definitions. Of course, that's always important because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about. And there also additives give a certain prompt on discussing what is an additive and what is not. You have conditions of use, so how you use an additive, and that is very much linked also to what additives can do and how toxic or how dangerous they might be if they are used wrongly. And we have now a union list of authorized food additives, which is tantamount to full harmonization. And we have, in addition to what has already been referred to this morning in general labeling, there are also specific labeling requirements for specific additives if this is considered necessary as the outcome of the evaluation. As I said, definitions, conditions of use, and procedures. This contains is addressed in this legislation. So you have normally a technological function of a feed additive that is referred to in Annex 1. You have a list of food additives approved for use in food and conditions of use in Annex 2, and you have a list of food additives approved for use in food additives themselves, food enzymes and food flavorings, and the conditions of use. So that is sort of the second step or the second level. And you have the traditional foods for which certain member states continue to prohibit the use of certain categories of food additives. You have further on additional labeling information for certain food colors. And here you can see why I try to explain a bit the history of behind our legislation. You can see here that we have this discussion that we had for years and years on traditional foods, so on the fish, on the yellow fish in the UK, and we have also certain use of antimicrobials in cheese production. We have the use of these nitrates in meat products. These have all created this kind of list of certain foods for which there are prohibitions, and also on the other hand, in the legislation that we have, there are certain rules on these foods. So this is all a result of the compromising that we had to do between the different uses that we had in the Union before it became the Union, when we were still the community, and the case-by-case approval of certain additives over the years. So the definition, food additives are, first of all, any substance. And there you have to distinguish between what they are and what they are not. So they are not consumed as food. So it might sound simple if you say a potato is not a food additive, because it's clear that's a staple food. But in some cases, it's not so easy to distinguish, is this now an additive or is it simply an ingredient? So spices, for instance, you could discuss this borderline, where do they belong? And therefore, you have to also add used and not used as a characteristic food ingredient. So salt, for instance, you could argue that salt, also discussed often whether too much salt is good for you or not, is a food additive because you put it into food in small amounts. But it is, on the other hand, we use it, everybody in the world, for such a long time that it really doesn't make it a critical substance to put into food. And why is that? So you also have to distinguish a bit on how much effort you want to put into the regulation of certain things. Is it necessary or not? So it has been decided that all of these things are used as a characteristic food ingredients and would not fall under the legislation. The other issue that is characteristic for food additives is that they are added for technological purpose, either in the manufacturing, in the processing, in the preparation, in the treatment, in the packaging, in the transport, and in the storage. This is something that is also reflected in the Codex decision on what is a food additive, and is a discussion that also has to be addressed on a case-by-case basis often with many additives. So concerning manufacturing, for instance, you have something which is called a processing aid. So something that you put in the food, many enzymes, for instance, that afterwards is not, you need it for the process itself, but afterwards it's not contained in the food anymore. So is this an additive? In the case of European legislation, we have decided that these are addressed as processing aids and are taken out. There are also borderlines between certain treatments and storage issues. For instance, there is a borderline between pesticides, which are often used to preserve the freshly harvested fruit. For instance, many strawberries couldn't be transported such a long time if they weren't treated with some sort of fungicides. It has been decided in the past that these fungicides would not be preservatives, but would remain in the pesticide legislation. So, feed additives are usually things like colors, adding or restoring the color of food. There are colors which are used in restoring, where you could say if something loses the color for instance, in heating strawberries to put them into cans, you often lose the color because of the cooking process. These kind of coloring is meant by restoring a color in a food. We have also sweeteners to sweeten foods, and these are not only sugars of certain kinds, but these are also tabletop sweeteners, which you have on the table to do this afterwards, and these are also products which contain additives. We have preservatives, and these are a very important category of food additives, because they are prolonging the shelf life of foods and by protecting them against deterioration. And if you look at the last 50 years of food production, you will find out that your foods are coming from further and further away. And also, in former times, people went shopping like every second day, maybe even every day. And today, this is rather not done anymore, but you go to the big supermarket one time in the weekend and you put everything in there. So the consumer has a much more the expectation that the food that he or she buys is staying much longer, and that has created a lot of pressures on the industry to also use preservatives, which have, on the other hand, after some time, and I must say in Europe it started somewhere the 80s or 90s, where people said, do we want all these preservatives in the food? Because some of them are not, if you eat them all the time, you might get problems with them. Some people went allergic against certain things. So that created then a pushback of the use of preservatives from that political pressure, rather to have even longer shelf life, back to, yes, longer shelf life, but without any chemical aid. So the slogan of this was food without chemistry, which is impossible, obviously, if you think about it, but that's a sort of a slogan. So that created a sort of a pushback here, and more thinking about how you can preserve things better with other means. And then you went into the discussions more about these antioxidant products, which are often things like vitamin C, which is aiding there without being perceived as such a severe preservative. So antioxidants then became more important and were more discussed, because they're also prolonging the shelf life, but are not perceived as such a chemical stuff. Same issue concerning stabilizers. So these are products which keep not only the shelf life, but also the way that a product looks like better. And if you listen to what I've been saying, you see that also many products can belong to several categories. For instance, vitamin C can have an influence on the color, preserve the color of something, because it's preventing that a product gets oxidized and loses its color, and it may also be considered as a color. The last products are emulsifiers. They maintain the oil and water mixture in a food, and we all know that from butter. Probably the problem is that from cosmetics, where you also, before they use them, you have to really shake them, and many products need these emulsifiers, because otherwise you would be shaking everything before we use it very rigorously all the time before we had the right mixture. So these are helping there. The conditions of use. So we said that we need certain additives and preservatives, especially as we expect longer shelf lives, and we expect foods to be looking nicely if you're buying it. So then, of course, there are safety concerns if you use too much. Or if you use maybe products which have a toxicological concern behind them. So there shouldn't be any safety concerns, which means that they shouldn't be, grosso modo, not be toxic. Sorry. So on the other hand, we shouldn't be using just anything just because we have it, but there should be also a reasonable technological need behind this, which is not achieved by something that is economically or technologically more practicable. So here you see what Patrick also mentioned this morning, we are moving more and more into a policy of balances. So it's not only safety, but we're looking at all of the products also more and more into, is it also worth using it? What are the risk and benefit? This is to avoid certain harsh prohibitions, for instance. Sometimes a product cannot be on the market anymore if you cannot use a certain additive. A product cannot be imported from Thailand to Europe without certain additives because it won't stay so long. Strawberries cannot be imported, for instance, from Spain to northern Europe without this fungicides that we mentioned. So we are also balancing our way of life in the food, especially in the additives legislation. So we're balancing, can we have a certain food or can't we have it if we are not using the additive. So the next thing to consider is the additive misleading the consumer? So if you want to use a color to make a food that is already decayed look like it's fresh, this would be a classical misleading of the consumer. So if you have a piece of meat that is already gone bad and looks greenish because of the pseudomonas on it, then to color it red so that it looks nicely is definitely misleading the consumer, even endangering the consumer. There are obviously examples which are not so harsh, but it can be that this is the only motivation behind the coloring of a food, and that should not be the case. So we are rather have put into the legislation now and expressed that now, that there should be advantages and benefits for the consumer also in using an additive. That can be that you have a longer shelf life and then you don't have to buy it all the time. You can buy it in bigger units. You can buy it from further away countries. You can, and for that reason, for better prices, it's all of this can be hiding behind this. And therefore, we have also specific conditions for colors and sweeteners, which are related to or creating specific problems in this area. So the list of food